Lately, I've seen a lot of ads on Facebook Marketplace for motorcycles that don't run, and they'll always say something hilarious like cranks but doesn't start, or runs just needs new engine, something ridiculous like that. But every once in a while, I find a good one and I buy it. This bike is an 06 VTX 1300R, I believe. I have a review video on a very similar bike. It's the C, but it's pretty much the same bike. So if you want to watch a review on the actual bike, that is available there. And this thing is very similar. It's just got the much bigger fenders, which some people like them. Leave it at that. But I'm making this video to, first of all, see if we can get this bike running, and also kind of talk about some of the things I look for when I'm buying a bike that doesn't run. Because at this point I've bought 5 bikes that don't run and only had one that I couldn't get running. So I don't know everything about it, but I'm starting to learn. That's what we're talking about today. Let's get into it. So in my opinion, the absolute best thing about this bike is that it has a good battery in it. It has a battery tender lead, and the guy I bought it from kept it charged. And check this out. It turns over. That's a huge deal, because I know before I buy it that the engine's not locked up, that the battery's good, that all the electronics are at least working to get to the point where it turns it over. Otherwise, it's a little bit extra of a gamble. Other things to look for are make sure that the bike has oil in it. This one, you can see the oil's pretty disgusting, but there is oil in it, so not worried about it being super dry. And then a huge thing to look for is what does the inside of the tank look like. I don't know if you can see this, but this tank looks perfect inside. A rusty tank is a pain in the ass. You just basically need to get rid of all the rust and coat it, which is possible, but it costs money and it takes a long time. And then you want to look for condition of tires. So there's a date code on tires that lets you know exactly when they're from. If they're older than like 5 or 10 years, you got to be careful, especially on a motorcycle. It's not really worth the risk. This one, the front tire is cracked and dry rot and old, so that needs to be replaced. But the actual tread is good and they do hold air, so they'll work for now while I'm just getting it running. Another thing I like to look for is rust on the frame. I've had bikes that were kind of rusty in the swing arm, like back where you can't really see it when you're looking at the bike, but because it's flinging water and potentially salt at the swing arm constantly, it's getting coated with that road grime and could potentially rust. This one looks great, so not too worried about that. And then it's got little scuffs on it. It's got a mark on the fender here. It's got a little dent and mark on the tank. Again, I'm not too worried about it because, and here's the great part about buying a bike doesn't run, you can get it for a crazy deal. I bought this one for 1,100 bucks, which, I mean, I think that's a great deal. It's worth more than that in parts alone. So worst case scenario, I can't get it running, it's worth it as a parts bike. And the cherry on top is that the title is clean, and I've got that, so I have my suspicions about what's wrong with this bike. Let's take a look at it, see if we can't fix it. I already pulled the air filter cover off, and there's no air filter in this bike. I think he was trying to start it with starting fluid. So there is some oil in the air box, which I don't like. It's probably coming from the breather, but we'll figure that out. But basically, I think that the gas in this tank is bad. I need to take the tank off, drain the gas. I have a new petcock for this bike because the bottom of the petcock has a little bit of gasoline on it. So we're gonna take the tank off, take the carb off, replace the petcock, drain the tank, clean the carb, put the carb back on. My money says that this bike will start. Let's get into it. That is dirty. She'll clean up. This bike is so easy to work on, and that's another important thing kind of to consider. These pretty much modern, I guess you could call them modern Hondas, are so easy to work on. That's a big plus for me. This bike has a bunch of LEDs all over it. Underglow, brother. If you're getting into working on Japanese bikes, the biggest thing I can tell you, the most life-changing thing you can possibly do is get a JIS screwdriver. It's not a Phillips, it's a JIS. If you've been stripping all the screws on your Japanese motorcycle and you don't know why, it's because you don't have the actual screwdriver. It's a game changer. underglow. Man, this stuff is everywhere on this bike. There's actual cobwebs on the carburetor, so you know this thing hasn't run in a long time. Oh man, and it's squeaking. She needs some lube. All right, I'm gonna pull this carb off and let's take a look at what we're working with here. Well, there she is. Actually, it's not as bad as I thought it would be in here. So these are the original jets out of the bike, or at least they're from the actual manufacturer of the carb. They're Kian, and they look fine to me. There was no gas in this carb, so it was properly drained before it was shut off. I'm still gonna spray it with some cleaner and I'll put it back together. Otherwise, I just have to drain this tank, replace the petcock, and put it back together, see if it fires. All right, I got this gas tank all drained up, only got a little bit of gasoline in my eye. But you can see this old petcock is gross. It was definitely leaking a little bit. According to the last guy, he said it just wasn't getting gas to the carb. I think he was right, because I think that this diaphragm in here has probably failed, and that's what was happening, because the carb was dry, bone dry. But luckily we have Amazon. It's like 20-some dollars for a Chinese one. Ugh. And it came with a fuel line and a little filter and stuff. I've never seen this before. I got the little pre-filter stuck in there. Oh, it's not too bad. I'll clean the rest of the bike later, but the parts that I can't get to while it's together, I'm just hitting now. Okay, tank is drained, new petcock. It's ready to go back on the bike pretty much. And all I'm waiting for now is a gasket for the float bowl, which I actually 3D print those, so I just forgot to print one. So the bike's gonna go back together in a couple days, but for now, I'm just gonna start buffing some of these chrome parts, because all of this stuff, you can see it's hazy, and it's gonna come up really nice. If you want to make an old bike look good, buffing the chrome is the quickest way to do it. And then once I get this bike up and running, I'll give it a couple washes, and after a couple washes, all that dirt will get loose and the thing will look way better than when I first got it. Okay, we got the carb all sprayed out and cleaned up. That should be good to go. Got my 3D printed gasket in there. And we put the tank back on, just kind of temporarily. Everything's hooked up. So I'm gonna throw some gas in the bike and we'll see if it starts. I had less gas than I thought, and I did end up spilling a bunch of it, so I rinsed the bike off. And I don't even know if there's enough to actually get down to the petcock, but if there is, we'll know if this thing starts. Moment of truth. Well, it definitely runs. I put like a tiny bit of gas in it, so I don't think it's even filled up the carb completely. So I'm gonna run and get more gas, and then we'll see what's going on. You can waste a lot of time trying to fix a bike that just has bad or not enough gas. Okay, let's see if that's any different. All right, I started it again, and I found that with the choke pulled just a tiny bit out, you can rev it, and it's kind of working more normally now. My next step is to try and adjust this carb and make sure it's not just way out of adjustment as far as air fuel, because it just seems like it is running super lean. It's just getting too much air, not enough fuel, and that's why it needs a little bit of choke to run. But it is running, just not super well. So I've got to go do some research and figure it out, and then we'll see what we have to do to get this bike running right. So I'm taking the carb back off the bike. I think this bike is kind of too simple to have anything really major wrong with it besides the carb. So I'm going to just do a more thorough job cleaning this carb. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and dip it and just get it all the way super clean in all those little passages and everything in the carb, just to absolutely rule that out before I go trying to like change jet size or anything like that. All right, so I took the carb all the way down to just metal parts and brass parts. Brass is metal. And I'm going to go ahead and dip it in this stuff, and then I'll put it back together and see if we have any better luck than last time. All right, the carb is definitely looking a lot cleaner, so I'm gonna throw this back in the bike and catch up with you when the bike is back together, ready for the next test start. Okay, carb is super clean now. This is take 2 of trying to get this bike running. That's how I expect the bike to run. I guess you could call that a lesson learned. If it's running like the carb's dirty and you don't think the carb's dirty, it's dirty. It's almost always a fuel issue. That is what I'm talking about, yes. All right, quick summary. I bought a bike for $1,100 that did not run, and I put probably around $60 into 2 parts, an air filter because it didn't have one in it when I bought it, and a vacuum petcock. And the problem with the bike was the petcock was leaking and the carb was dirty up inside the little crevices and channels that are inside of a carburetor. So after fixing those things, which really, I mean, I put maybe 4 hours into the bike, it runs great. It runs fantastic. So I'm in this bike for around $1,200, and it's probably a $3,000 bike at least, especially once I clean it up a little bit more. There's really nothing major wrong with it. And so that kind of gets me kind of full circle to like what to look for when you're looking at the bike. I pointed out some of the stuff that was good about this bike, but the other thing that's really good about this bike is that I know that a VTX 1300 can only have so many problems. It could have like critical weird engine failure. Someone could have run it with no oil in it. There's always the outliers, but usually these bikes are fixable. You can fix them. You can make them run, and they're not old enough to have serious like issues finding parts. You need to know what bike to look for, and a Japanese cruiser, especially a V-twin with a single carb, basically that's what I look for. I'm no expert, but I've been successful with it a couple times. Let me know if you guys flip bikes, or if you're just like looking for a cheaper bike to be your first bike and you want to, you know, get something that you can fix up and save a bunch of money on. I've gotten kind of a weird addiction to buying these broken Hondas because they all seem to be fixable. So let me know what you guys thought about this type of video. I think they're fun. I need to throw in like wrenching on something video every once in a while because that's just who I am. Yeah guys, thanks for watching this one, and and I will see you in the next video.